This is David Axelrod.
And I'm Mike Murphy.
And together we're the Hacks on Tap. Every week, Murphy and I break down the latest in politics, and we give you our unfiltered and unvarnished view on what's really going on.
We're veteran campaign strategists and old friends from opposite sides of the aisle who have seen it all and now get to share our insights with you.
So pull up a bar stool and tune in.
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Cheers.
And now, live from Level 5 Productions on the island of Milleronia, it's The Larry Miller Show. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and everyone who's ever been caught with a tap bell. Oh, hiya, folks. Boy, it's good to be back. Welcome back to the Larry Miller Show. I'm Larry Miller, but in a way, aren't we all? And boy, I'll tell you, I know you don't know what a tap bell is, but I'll tell you a little later. And it was very handy. That's all I'm going to say so far. It's just good to be back. We're not on Milleronia today. We're back at Stately Miller Manor and in Southern California. And it's just beautiful, just gorgeous around here. And the music always makes me feel better, as you know, and the Colonel, too. That's the Harry Anderson Orchestra and the Barbara Bush Dancers featuring boy tenor R. Lee Ermey asking the musical question,
"What is your major malfunction, numbnut?"
That's in case you said for an instant there, wait, who was R. Lee Ermey? That's who he not only was, that's who he is. One of the greatest actors and the greatest Marines we've ever made in our country. And, well, you know, that line was from one of his movies, and he was very well known from that. The movie was Full Metal Jacket, and it was said, well, by the great Marine drill instructor and Sergeant Major in real life, R. Lee Ermey. And he just passed away a couple of days ago. He was 74 years old, and there's much to be said about him. But let's start with God bless you, Sergeant Major Ermey. You were great to watch on screen, and you were, and still are, a great Marine forever. You served and were decorated in Vietnam in harm's way for a long time. And you were wounded enough to be pulled out of combat, and you became a drill instructor for the Marines, and still a Marine. And as the father of a Marine, I can tell you, there's nothing better than a real Marine to real Marine recruits. And that's a great drill instructor. And boy, that fella, I loved that guy. I never worked with him, never met him, but he was great, not just in that movie and so many others. The second he walked into a barracks or a non-commissioned officers' club or led battle after battle, even the toughest enemies shook when they saw him. And they were right to do that, by the way. He was known to be, by the way, the best and most loving father and husband. And but when he put that uniform on and marched over to put the fear of God into some fat recruit, that young man never forgot it. And when you were hired by the great director Stanley Kubrick to be a special advisor on Full Metal Jacket, and, well, I'll tell you what, Stanley Kubrick saw him improvise his drill instructor behavior to some of the frightened actors there, and he said to himself, Kubrick said, "By God, never mind advisor, that man just became Sergeant Major Hartman in my movie." And he was. And boy, oh boy, he was so good in it. If you've seen that movie, Full Metal Jacket, Kubrick let him improvise the whole part. I mean, virtually the whole thing, except for maybe this or that. And including, by the way, the great line, "This is my rifle, there are many like it, but this one is mine." And Matthew Modine and Vincent D'Onofrio and all the actors. What actors that movie had raved with affection about him after he passed away. And just as I said just a couple of days ago, and so the Colonel and I thought a good tribute would be to say, you know what? In answer to your great important question,
What is your major malfunction, numbnut?
I don't know about you, but I laugh at everything he did in a very loving way. I mean, just holy mackerel, that this guy was the real thing. And so what is my major malfunction? And all of ours, everyone listening, including the Colonel? Well, Lee, I think it may be that we don't have more men like you. And I'm glad you were here, and I'm glad, I'll bet you God has you guarding the pearly gates right now. And no one, I'd like to see someone try and con his way in over you. Well, I'm not supposed to be here, but I thought if I could just talk to some of the people, the top people, including maybe even, the big man. I could get my way. Wait, are you picking me up? Why are you picking me up? Where are you taking me? That guy will not need an elevator to hell, because Lee can just lean over and toss him down there. Boy, oh boy. And, a great man, by the way. Those are places also for obits, because two other wonderful people just passed away at the same time, just a couple of days ago. One is Harry Anderson, who was a good friend and a great magician, a great actor. Harry. Oh, well, for instance, he was starring as the judge in late night. What's with the late night court show? Oh, for goodness sake, Night Court. Yeah, there's a smart host. What was the late night court show? Oh, Night Court. At any rate, he was great in everything. Everyone adored him. Last night I was doing a show down at the great Comedy and Magic Club in Hermosa Beach. And everyone, not surprisingly, and I mentioned Harry from the stage, really at the end of my act, to close that out and to say, because that stage was one he loved, down at the Comedy and Magic Club. And boy, when he came anywhere, folks, people would just flock to see him. And when one of the other magicians once at the club there had said, Harry came over and asked what he was enjoying, getting ready for his show, and the guy just kind of barely glanced up and said, I'm getting ready for this and that, and then just mumbled something. And the manager came over. Harry just, nodded and smiled and walked away. And the manager said, do you know who that was? That was Harry. Well, what do you mean? And the guy just his jaw dropped. Harry? Harry the Hat Anderson? Are you kidding? And the guy just almost exploded, because he couldn't believe he didn't just take the guy's hand and kneel down. Harry was the best of the best. And at the Comedy and Magic Club, not just there at the Magic Castle, at any place that used magicians. Boy, Harry was great. The best I've ever seen, and the funniest. He would talk in it and did stand up and tell stories in it. And I remember seeing for the first time when his wife Leslie, at the time was just his first wife, was his assistant still, and she had the great assistant's outfit on. And anything magicians do is okay with me. And Harry did it all. Boy, oh boy. And he wasn't an old man. He was 65 when he just passed away. And Harry, you are, like Lee Ermey, when he walked into a barracks, the whole place just went nuts and just stood to attention. And when he made speeches, people were just, and he would say things like numbnuts and then he'd call all the Marines there maggots whenever he made a speech. That included everybody, the generals, it didn't matter. And they all howled. They loved him. And it was the same with Harry Anderson. He could walk in anywhere, into a theater or a nightclub, and everyone knew him and everyone adored him. And they were right. And God bless you, Harry. And Barbara Bush just died. Now here's something, it's so interesting that sometimes we don't know all sorts of things about people. First of all, she was 92 when she passed away, and her husband, President Bush, Bush 41, is 93. And you think, well, get a load of these two. They really did it and lasted, and they sure did, because she first met him when she was a schoolgirl in high school, 16 years old. She was a real aristocratic, old line Yankee family from, I think, New Hampshire, but she was the real deal herself, and that was when President Bush, George Bush at that point, George H.W. Bush, was the first man to enlist in the Navy as a fighter pilot for World War II. And also, by the way, you may or may not know, he was the first man to be shot down in battle in the Navy in World War II, and he was in the Pacific Ocean without a plane for quite a while. And he and everyone who loved him was mighty glad when they found him and plucked him out. And he met his future wife, Barbara, and she said he was the first and only man I ever kissed. And they were together 73 years, folks. Married 73 years, that's kind of a lesson or something, isn't it? I don't even know anymore, but that's something. And she was known, by the way, by her kids and loved ones, friends, and everybody as just, she liked good manners, and she didn't take bad manners. And she used to make them laugh by whatever she said. No, remember I told you, you don't do this, you don't do that. There was, I saw Britt Hume on the news last night, remembering that he was at a benefit that the First Lady, Barbara Bush, was having at the time, and for a good cause, for literacy. She was very big on literacy, or as one of her kids said, love, laughter, and literacy. Those were her really fondest things. And at any rate, Britt Hume said that he was partnered up with Chrissy Everett, the great tennis player, and also known as just a wonderful person. Chrissy was, and she came, and she was lovely too. She was very beautiful, and she came, as Britt said, wearing a very short evening dress, but he said very, very short. It was gold sequins. And the word at the White House, the word came down quickly that Barbara wanted her to know she didn't appreciate that dress. And as Britt said, well, I liked it, but I understand why the First Lady didn't. And boy, folks, she was really something. When she first became the First Lady, when George, her husband, won in 1988, and the press gathered around and asked her how she felt that she was coming in after such a lovely First Lady, a beautiful Nancy Reagan, and such a high fashion First Lady. And Barbara said, well, all I can tell you is there are millions of fat, white-haired, wrinkled old women all across America who are just thrilled by it. That was pretty good. And by the way, she had 6 kids. They had 6 kids together, and she had a 7th, though, Robin, who died at 3 years old from, I think it was a meningitis. And Barbara Bush, just at that point, her hair went completely white overnight after the death of her daughter. It's one of those things that, well, I'm sure you know, that just happens sometimes to people. overnight, bang, it was all white, the way it is now, the way it was her whole life. And in memory of her daughter, she never colored it. She never did anything else with it, but just kept it that way, the way it was. At any rate, these are good folks, and it was wonderful to have them around. You might not have thought all the time about them, but it sure was wonderful. I stayed in the same hotel room that Barbara Bush had just stayed in. And I was working at a hotel down on the California coast, the Ritz-Carlton, something like that. And it was a very nice hotel. Well, once you have the word Ritz in it, I think you're going to have a nice hotel. And she was just there. This wasn't that she was in the room 2 years before. She was just there the day before. She was there for 2 or 3 days, and she was doing something down there for another benefit of her cause, literacy. And they said to me as I checked in, well, we're going to put you in, the First Lady was just here, Barbara Bush, and we're going to put you in that room in the presidential suite. She was here alone, and I don't know about you, but I just said, wow, really? That's kind of neat. I mean, it's, couldn't wait to see it, because I'm sure also it's going to be a nice room. Plus, it's not as if, what would I be worried about? It's not like a Russian wrestler was just staying in there with 3 of his friends and they got tattoos together. It's Barbara Bush. And it was a beautiful room. See, not my kind of place. I mean, maybe not necessarily a guy place. They had Queen Anne tables and chairs and, things that, well, you're probably never going to sit in. And that's in the big living room / dining room / chef's area. And, but that was pretty neat to think, well, how do you like that? I'm in the First Lady's room. And got a pretty good night's sleep that night, too. Because, again, there was nobody there just with kind of, big muscles and getting a tattoo the night before. At any rate, rest in peace, and God bless all of you. R. Lee Ermey, Harry Anderson, and Barbara Bush. It's always good to remember anyone who, well, we notice, you notice, I notice, the Colonel notices, well, passes away. And you want to stop for a second and say, you know what? I'm glad you were here. Well, I'm glad the 3 of them were here. And I'll bet they're all watching together now. Well, of course, Lee has to be on guard duty at the pearly gates. He probably works a regular shift on that. And God probably said to him, I'll just give you a cloud if you want. And Ermey, I'll bet, said something like, I think you've been letting in a lot of trash, and I'm going to be the one who stops it at the gate. To which God probably said, okay. And by PayPal. That's right, folks. Speaking of good deeds and good things and good people, if you work with PayPal, you start right off by feeling you're saving the world yourself, and who knows, maybe you are. They're a great group, and a great group to work with, to donate to. And if you enjoy my show, and why wouldn't you, and you'd like to send us a few bucks to help out, and why wouldn't you, you can do it all through PayPal. And instead of saying donate or pay what you like, or, I always like to say buy us some drinks. I think that's really the best way. That there are different levels, of course, with drinking. There's levels 1 through 5, all the way up to, we're driving to Florida!
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
I was just going to say to you, that was the perfect place for it again. We're going to hold on to that. The Colonel got that from the internet, but boy, there's some great shots and that was a happy day. By the way, what a great guy. But yeah, we'll keep that for a while. What is your major malfunction, numbnuts? So what you want to do is, if you want to go to PayPal, and why wouldn't you? You go, you can get there anyway, your computer, your phone, your laptop, your this, that, but you know what? Don't bother with that. Let us get you there. What you do is, You go to our website, which is LarryMillerPodcast.com. Who's on the Mountain? Tom Mix. Oh, pardon me. I shouldn't have had the locks. But you know what? It really matters. Look for our PayPal banner on our website. We have one. Click that. Every little bit helps us keep the old leg lamp lit. And thank you to everyone who has contributed already and everyone who's just about to. It means a lot to us, but so do you. And that brings me to my favorite part of the show, the joke of the week. I like this one, too. That's why I'm chuckling. But I think I'll be chuckling all day at just the memory also. Harry Anderson's so great and Barbara Bush and just... But boy, R. Lee Ermey, that fella was not someone to be argued with. When he had that uniform on, he was great with his kids and great with his wife and great with toys and watching a game on TV. When he put that uniform on, he was not the guy you wanted to walk up to and say, "Do I have to do that?" Because the answer, first of all, is yes, you do, okay? You have to walk away real fast because otherwise he's going to just pick you up, give you the bum's rush. That's the collar in one hand and the back of the belt in the other and just right off the cloud. Be a long time before you see those pearly gates again. Well, this is a good joke of the week. I think you're going to like it. The Colonel and I both did. There's a young married couple, and they're living in the suburbs, and they love each other, and they have a good life there and a good house, and no kids yet, but they're working on it. And they get a new neighbor who comes in, a young single fellow named Steve, and they invite him over for dinner one night. Get to know you sort of thing, and get to tell you about the neighborhood. So they have a terrific dinner, and they've got it all. She made a beautiful Caesar salad, and she made a beautiful main course. And about halfway through the meal, he drops a fork, and no big deal there, and just bends down under the table, picks it up, and as he's under the table, he just glances up and sees that his hostess, his new friend, isn't wearing underwear. And that's he does what, well, I'm sure every fellow would do, and just go, well. And he starts to come out from under the table and bonks his head right on it, and just he gets out. And, she and her husband are just sitting there smiling, and they go on talking about whatever they were saying, and dinner goes on. And her husband goes to put a record on the stereo after dinner and make them all another drink, and she goes into the kitchen to start clearing dishes, and he goes in to help her, and he brings some dishes in, and she turns right to Steve, and just says, "It's funny, Steve, I noticed you went under the table there and bonked your head. Did you see anything interesting down there?" And he's, just thunderstruck, and he looks at her and says, "Yes, I did." And she smiles and says, "Well, I've got some news for you. For $100, you might see a lot more." And then she leans over to him and whispers, "For instance, like tomorrow afternoon, my husband's going to be at work all day, and why don't you see what you can see?" And she goes back to cleaning more dishes, and he's blinking, and he's just thunderstruck, and he goes back out to the living room. Sure enough, the next day, he comes over about 2:00, and he comes in, and he smiles, and she smiles, and he holds up. He's got $100, and he hands it to her, and they have a good time together. And she gives him a hug and a kiss, and it goes on from there. I'll stop there, but it involves everything. And, so a little later on that day, her husband comes home from work, and he says to his wife, "Hi, honey, how was your day?" And she says, "Fine, how was yours?" And he said, "Good, good." And then he says, "Was Steve over here today?" And she's a little weird, just, yes, he was. He did. He came by in the afternoon. And the husband says, "Oh, all right. Did he give you $100? And she's really struck now, and her mouth opens. She said, Yes, he did. He gave me $100, and her husband says, well, that's good to know, because now I know he's a good guy. See, he came by my office this morning to borrow $100 and said he'd stop by here and give you the money this afternoon. That's pretty good. Colonel and I like that. It also reminded me, and the two of us, that it's funny in the joke world how there are situations like that you just accept in the premise of the joke. Oh, well, she's all right, so she's a prostitute, then you're saying, and but it's a very commonplace thing in joke world. It's not either upsetting or just, she what? He what? What? They what? It just happens in the world of jokes. So in any case, it happened in that one. And that brings me to my second favorite part of the show, the Poetry Corner. That string quartet is nice. And by the way, it turns out I think maybe the guy coughing had just been thrown off of the pearly gates by Lee Ermey. And maybe that's what he was coughing about. He was dusting himself off and thinking, well, I didn't think that was a weird question to ask that fella. But he's a tough Marine. Anyway, this is a fine poem by Claude McKay. He was a Jamaican-American, and he lived from 1889 to 1948, and he was part of the Harlem Renaissance, a movement in the 1920s that celebrated the intellectual, social, and artistic flourishing of Harlem, New York. And quite a writer, too, and this is one of his called Courage. Oh, lonely heart, so timid of approach, like the shy tropic flower that shuts its lips to the faint touch of tender fingertips. What is your word? What question would you broach? Your lustrous warm eyes are too sadly kind to mask the meaning of your dreamy tale, your guarded life too exquisitely frail against the daggers of my warring mind. There is no part of the unyielding earth, even bare rocks where the eagles build their nest, will give us undisturbed and friendly rest. No dewfall softens this vast belt of dearth. But in the socket-chiseled teeth of strife that gleam in serried files in all the lands, we may join hungry, understanding hands and drink our share of ardent love and life. Isn't that lovely? Well, that guy was a bit of a Renaissance himself. And that means it brings me to my third favorite part of the show, the Magic Movie Moment. Triple M. My favorite piano note to end a song. And this is from 1987. And I've mentioned it already. It's Full Metal Jacket, directed by Stanley Kubrick. What a cast, starring Matthew Modine, Vincent D'Onofrio, Adam Baldwin, so many others, and R. Lee Ermey. This was the first movie that really brought him to the public eye. Certainly brought him to my public eye, and to be honest, I always loved Stanley Kubrick, but I was never that crazy about the movie, not Full Metal Jacket. It's just not nuts about it, but that first half of it in base camp, at the Marine base camp, well, that was, and the Colonel and I agree on this, that was kind of its own movie. That was just on its own. And if there was a star of it, and there was a star, it was R. Lee Ermey, as well, Major Sergeant Hartman. And boy, oh boy, was he ever good in that. And I'm going to tell you something. That's why, God bless him, the magic movie moment for today is him in that half of the movie. It's that half of the movie, that base camp, that Marine base camp, was so well done, so well directed, so well acted, so well written, but good Lord, it was all Lee Ermey. And it should be good for him. He took control every single thing that he said, and he didn't take an instant to wait. He was climbing on top of everyone with all his words. And remember, they were his words. These were things he said that he knew, that he used when he was a drill instructor in the Marines, when he did everything as a Marine. And boy, he made that half. And these great actors, Vincent D'Onofrio is a fabulous actor. And good Lord, so was Matthew Modine. And boy, they were in front of Lee Ermey, though, as that Major Sergeant Hartman. Whoa, they didn't quite know what to do. They stepped up and they adored him for it, because he brought to that movie what is worth a magic movie moment today. So the magic movie moment is not a moment. It's about from the first half of Full Metal Jacket. I may not be the biggest fan of the full movie, but that Marine Corps training base and that part of the movie, starring R. Lee Ermey and all these other great actors, is as magical as any movie moment can be. The whole base camp section. But you know what? It reminded me from seeing all my friends from school, well, not all of them, but about 10 of them, at my friend Pete Hunter's daughter's wedding last week, Julie. And we were all, by the way, in the same fraternity, too. And when one Cooch, Rob Minicucci, was All-American in lacrosse. And Jeff Dykins and Andy Mann, I loved these guys and still do. And they were there with their wives and no kids on this trip, even though they all had to come out to the West Coast. It was just a wonderful wedding. And I'm telling you, it reminded me, we started telling stories about our college days, DAZE. And you know what? We had a great time. These were good people, and they still are. The stories we had, and I was telling the colonel here, for instance, we had a tap bell. I mentioned that in the introduction. And in our fraternity, see, there was a fire alarm, the way there should be, in all buildings, in all dorms, in all fraternities. And we thought it was great to have that, although we disconnected it. That's the simple truth to the whole thing. So we unhooked it. We had guys who knew how to do that kind of thing. Well, one or two of them anyway. If they just clipped the green wire, but they did. They clipped whatever the right wires were. And so whenever the bell went off, and we took those two wires and unhooked them, and you could still touch them, but whenever they'd go off, the bell wouldn't ring in the firehouse. The bell wouldn't bring firemen. It would bring, just a big fire. But we used it as a tap bell, and that's what we used to call it. See, when you went on tap, the social chairman, and I was one for a couple of years, the social chairman was in charge of putting a keg of beer on tap downstairs in the barroom. And, that was me. And we started using it as a tap bell. So we could use those two wires, put them together. Once you put a keg of beer on, you just go into the little booth there in the circular staircase on the side of the house and put the two wires together, and it would just, and you hold that for about, just 10 or 15 seconds, which is a long time. That bell could really be loud. Well, it's supposed to get you out of the house. But everyone knew, we're on tap. So, that was a tap bell. And I think that was a great thing to have. Thank God no one was ever, killed. I mean, there was a fire. I'm sure I've told folks about this fire. There was one fire. And that it was a Sunday morning after a lot of, a big party the night before. But you can always say that about that place. We loved it because there was always a big party the night before. And there was a fire that started that morning. It was about 9 or 10 in the morning. And it was a real fire that started, burning things down. And the firemen, the whole fire department came because they saw it. Not because the bell rang, but they saw it. And guys would start coming out of the house, too. It was 9, 10 in the morning on Sunday morning. And they were blinking. They were a little tired. They would normally have been still asleep. But they started coming out, and they were sent back in. When we saw, we all said to them, and I was there, and so we all said, hey, don't just stand here now. Come on, let's all go back in and get the beer. And you can't just leave beer there. So they went back in, we all did, to get kegs of beer. Those are not easy to move around, by the way. But to get a keg of beer. Also, we had beer bottles, Miller beer, which was always known as the champagne of bottled beer. And Gary Strassenberg, that's right, was one of the social chairmen at that point. Gary used a Coke machine to hold the beer bottles. So you could take out, it was one of those where you open it by a lid. It was a giant rectangle, and you open it from the top, and you saw all the bottles there, and you could get a bottle of Coke for, what was it, 25 cents, I guess. And then you slide the bottle along and move it over to where you just put the quarter in and pop it up, and you could take the bottle of Coke. So Gary changed that all to bottles of Miller beer. And he thought it would be a good idea to go up and get those, too. And it's a fine idea. The only thing a little wrong with it was, well, there's a fire. And all the firemen are running in all their full fire clothes, all the coats, the masks, the helmet, And I got that. Maybe we'll take a picture of that later. But they did, and Gary ran over to the Coke machine, which was on the second floor, which was just kept on the floor there. You could say it was blocking exit, but why be negative like that? So Gary opened the lid, reached in, and what became a famous moment in the fraternity, he reached in and just said, "Ah, ice cold." And firemen still running this way and that way, and putting out the fire. So as guys were coming out, they would have like armfuls of books and things like that, because it was a school. And he said, "Here, drop those." And he knocked the books out of their hands and just started putting bottles of beer in their arms. So he'd give each guy 6, 8 bottles of beer and say, "Okay, head out the front door." And that was the mission. That was the fire mission. And so he did. He emptied the whole machine with guys, trying to not die. And they all walked out there, and we had put one of the kegs of beer on tap. What's another case of, why not? Would you argue with that? Who's going to argue? And we put it on, we put it on a big table from the living room that was heavy enough to hold a keg of beer. And we had the school cups there that were 12-ounce cups that said Amherst College and showed the chapel on it. And so we'd all pour beers and stand around as the firemen were putting the fire out. But other than that, it was a great Sunday because, hey, look at this. It's 10:45 and we put a keg on and didn't have to ring the tap bell. And I remember the greatest guy, the president, John William Ward. President Ward came by. I really liked him, and everyone liked him a lot. And he noticed that, all the guys are coming out holding bottles of beer and carrying kegs. And he just looked at me, all the fellas, and just said, "Well, I guess you have to know what's important, huh?" But we agreed. We just said, "Well, yeah. What would you?" He said, "Well, it's a school. You could take some of the books." And we all agreed, though. We kind of said, "The what?" And it was better to do, we can get the books, maybe, wouldn't burn, or we could get more, maybe, from the professors. But they wouldn't get us all this beer. We had to save that. And it was, I guess you could say, a funny fire. And, you know what? And that summer, by the way, I stayed up at school there, and there was a string orchestra was staying there too. They came from out of state, from different colleges, and they had string quartets and a full string orchestra, and also woodwind quintets, and they were good folks. They were great, and I had a terrific crush on one of them. Oh, her name was Lori, and I don't want to embarrass her and say her full name, but I didn't know much about women. I didn't know how to ask a girl out. I was a little behind on that. I never felt bad about that because I thought, well, I'll figure that out as soon as I start telling jokes. But you know what? Oh, I had a terrific crush on her, and she was pretty. She was a violinist, a terrific violinist. And I became friends with one of her old friends from all these string orchestras, Henry, a guy from New York, and he was a terrific guy. We became friends, and we'd hang out every day, and we'd go work out in the weight room, and then maybe stroll to the market and I was staying at one of the dorms there in a single room, and I was working in the dining hall, so I saw them all the time, all the meals. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And Henry knew I had a crush on Lori, too. And he said, well, just ask her out, don't be an idiot. I think she's a nice girl anyway, and I bet she likes you anyway. And I said, I don't know. And folks, one day Henry comes to me, he said, hey, I've got a great surprise for you. Be at your room tonight at 11:30. And this is going to make you happy. I just knew he had set me up with Lori, and I was happy. And boy, folks, I did. So around after the dinner hour, working there in the dining hall, I went back to my little room again there in the dorm, and I showered and shaved again down the hall in the regular bathroom there, and did everything. You shower, shave, brush your teeth, and put on Old Spice, and I got dressed. This was dressed up for me. I don't know about you at 20 years old, but dressed up was I had a pair of fancy jeans, designer jeans, and I didn't ever wear that kind of stuff. I wasn't really attracted to it, but my mom had got me a pair of I can't remember the make, but it was designer jeans, and I thought, well, that's a good idea, and I put on a kind of a nice shirt, like a hippie shirt, red with very small flowers on it. But I thought I was dressed to the nines, and I put on some loafers, like penny loafers I had. So this may not sound that terrific to you, but this was the best stuff I had, and well, I was really looking forward to this. And I remade the bed, and Lori was going to come over there, and we'd go out somewhere, I guess, and maybe get a beer somewhere, and that was at 11:30, and I was all shined up and all dressed up and all powdered and Old Spiced, and at 11:30, and I opened my door, by the way, into the hallway there, just to leave it open. I was ready, and at exactly 11:30, there's a knock on the door, and there's Henry. I said, oh, hi, come on in, and he comes in, and I still left the door open. I went outside into the hallway, looked one way, looked the other, looking for Lori, and I said, I came in, and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm looking for her, and because he hadn't told me anything yet, and he said, who's her? Who are you looking for? I said, Lori. I just knew when you said to me, be at the room at 11:30, I figured you'd set me up with her, that you'd said, hey, come on by, go to Larry's room, and he really likes you, and Henry looked at me, and he just said, oh. He said, I'm sorry. No, he said, the surprise is, he said, I'm gay and I want to have an affair with you. And there was, as you can imagine, there was a pause. First of all, it's fine with, me. Nothing bothers me. But, I looked at him and I said, wait, what? And that was his surprise. And I'm standing there in my designer jeans and my penny loafers with my Old Spice, just filling the room with Old Spice. And he said, I'm sorry, it's not about, Lori. And I said, well, no, this is, it's, and I didn't quite know what to say. He said, you're not annoyed, are you? I said, no, but don't be silly. Because the truth is, folks, I always thought this is great news. Something like this, if something like this ever happened, that I would start to think, well, this is terrific news because I'm getting through to someone. Someone is saying, isn't that nice that someone is saying, hey, I like you and I find you likable and attractive and I think we should, go out on dates. I don't even know what the words are, but I mean, and then I would always say something. Well, wait, you mean like, and then holding hands and kissing or something, right? Because I don't. And I said to him, no, I'm not upset about it's very flattering. It's great. I said, the thing is though, I'm not gay. I don't want to, I like Lori and, I like that team, I like the other side. And we just talked for another, say 10 minutes or so. And but I thought that was, time to say, I didn't say, okay, come on, let's go out and get a beer I just said, oh, okay. But anyway, he said, if you like her, just call her. Go over to her. You see her every day at 3 meals. Just tell her that. Ask her out to a movie. And even for me, that was like crazy. What do you mean, ask her? I. That's why I thought you would ask her out for me. But and he was very nice. And then he said to me, he asked if we could kiss, if we could have a kiss, sort of like to mark the occasion. And I felt, I think we've marked it already. I don't need to mark it further, but I understand what you mean. And, but I think that memory might stay with me 1 billion years. I'm not sure, but so we laughed together and he said, all right, well, thanks. I said, Henry, you're all right. You're a great guy. And, I'm glad we became friends. And that was it. He left. And then I took one more look down the hall just in case Lori had gotten it into her head to just come by anyway. But she didn't. I went out with her once, by the way, a couple of months later, back on where she lived on Long Island. And boy, it was great to see her. And I still didn't know what I was doing, though, and that's all right. But it goes to show you, life is always funny in that way. That's what it meant to me to see a lot of my old friends from school. And it brought back a lot of memories. I have a lot of good stories, and I might just tell you one a week for a while now. And that's all because the wedding was so beautiful. And I know that, but you and I know the same things anyway, folks. Homer is Homer, and Pluto is a planet. So remember, as always, if you walked out of bed today and had a job to go to and a home to come back to and someone there who cares about you, folks, the game's over and you've won. And that's sure the truth, then and now. Be well. We'll see you next week.